What's up, college football fans? Snowy Valente here once again with the Mean Green Show, and tonight I'm joined by none other than Jared and CJ, and I will give them the floor to introduce themselves and tell you where you guys can find them and all their great work. And before we get into all things with our new conference realignment and how happy Jared and I are and how sad CJ is, guys, you already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football recruiting, G5 football, the transfer portal, any or all of the above, consider hitting that like and subscribe button because that is truly all that we talk about. All right, Jared, passing it to you first. Where can everybody find you at, and what do you do for UTSA?
Yeah, so I'm Jared Kalmus. I've been covering UTSA football since before it really existed. I was at the first practice and I've watched every game. So I am the Conference USA editor for Underdog Dynasty, which I guess I might be having a role change soon now. But primarily, most of my work is for my podcast and our Patreon, Alamodome Audible. So we've been doing that for a few years now. Cover all sports and all capacities over there. So thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. And CJ, where can they find you at?
Well, thank you. So you can find me. I have both of my Twitters plugged here, CJ Olson 2000 and FQ_SMU. Those are the two big ones that I put the most time and effort into. You can also find my podcast, the Roughing the Passer podcast. That's on Twitter at the RTP Pod, and you can find that wherever podcasts are found. And then, of course, I'm also one of the people that runs the main fifth quarter account at Fifth Quarter. Snowy, since we last talked, your boy got a promotion, so that's exciting. I also write articles there occasionally. I've just been so busy with real world stuff that I haven't been able to pump out a bunch of articles, but I've still been the Twitter presence has been strong, so you can check me out there. If you go to CJ Olson 2000, I've got everything linked in the bio. So that's my suggestion to everybody out there.
Awesome. Well, I'll just go ahead and tee things off. UTSA undefeated, SMU undefeated, UNT, we are not undefeated. So I feel like the kind of the stepchild here, but that's okay. Jared, you and I, we got some great news. I know you got to be happy about it. I'm happy about it.
Yeah.
We are going to the AAC. We are leveling up in conference. We did not get left behind. Hopefully all this is legit in this just hellhole of Conference USA that we all like to complain about. And we're moving on up, Jared. And, what are your thoughts? And what do you feel like the thought is amongst the UTSA faithful, especially, in the midst of a historical season?
Yeah.
And just moving forward. How are you guys feeling?
First, I mean, what a week for UTSA. I mean, shut out Rice 45-0. You get your first ranking in both the coaches poll and the AP poll. And then you get an invitation to the AAC, which has been the goal for UTSA. I mean, since pretty much they started the program. It's been a whiplash for sure, but this is definitely where UTSA wants to be. There was some talk about Mountain West, but I always felt that was like a fallback option. If they weren't included in the AAC expansion, maybe Mountain West would be a step up from Conference USA, and the shell that it's become was already pretty bad. But on the other hand, there's concern as well. UTSA has finally gotten to the point where they're competitive in nearly every sport in Conference USA. Facilities have finally started to get built after, 20, 30-year wait for a lot of this stuff. And UTSA's budget was finally like on par and not quite at the top of Conference USA, but it was in the top half. But now UTSA is jumping to the American where they're going to be near the bottom and all those things, right? Like, sports like volleyball and soccer and all that, they're going to have a big uphill battle to compete with some of these more established programs. But, at the end of the day, it's a move you got to make when you can make it. And, I'm feeling pretty confident that this exposure and, being associated with these established brands and stuff is really going to, raise all programs to a higher level. And, UTSA has already shown that when you give them a chance, they're going to take advantage of those opportunities. And, here they are now with a crazy undefeated season. So definitely excited to see what the future holds, but there's going to be some road bumps along the way. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, if you couldn't tell, myself and Jared, we're talking with a lot of gumption, speed, and bass in our voice. But CJ, how are you feeling? I know you're probably not feeling as high as we are. What are the thoughts as far as SMU goes?
Well, we're just focused on Tulane this Thursday night. We get to play on ESPN. That's always a good national crowd. Eventually, if we take care of business, we'll get to go to Cincinnati when they'll be hopefully still in the top 4 of the AP.
Yeah,
We're
might
just
get
really
college game day
focused
for that
on
one.
what's ahead of us. Sorry, what was that, Jared?
I said you might get college game day for that game.
Well, yeah, that would require us to take care of business and for Cincinnati to take care of business. But I mean, it is what it is. This is the way I look at it. This is not a good situation for us. This is bad for a number of reasons. First of all, there are a lot of guys at SMU that are due to get paid because, like, as far as promotions goes, like, we've kind of reached a point where, like, there's not that many promotions available. And so they're like Sonny Dykes needs an extension. Right now he's in Seth Luttrell range in terms of money. And so he needs a bump up, roughly Seth Luttrell range. We don't have to disclose it, but it's roughly in that neighborhood. And I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm concerned about, like, rising tides raise all boats, but I'm almost worried that instead of rising tides raise all boats, we're like hanging on for dear life. And now we have 6 people trying to pull us down, it's almost like crabs in a bucket. You know how, like, they can never get out because they're all trying to pull each other down. That's what I'm worried is going to happen, because I don't know if you saw what at Fear the Wave blog posted today. I quote tweeted it, but the SP Plus after alignment puts the Mountain West 3 points ahead of the American. So, like, Power 6, as far as I'm concerned, at the current moment is dead. And that's a problem because Power 6 is something that ESPN kind of subtly was backing financially. And now they don't necessarily have that incentive to back that anymore, especially considering they have the Sun Belt. And so that's a concern, that if Coastal still continues going in the way that they're going and they add Marshall, who's been on the rise, that I'm worried eventually we're looked at as kind of almost like where the Sun Belt is now. And that's bad for everybody involved except for like 3 or 4 teams. Because, Jared, you mentioned UTSA going to the Mountain West. The Mountain West might be a better option, if we're being honest, like, with where things are heading. So, that's your fallback until it turns out the fallback accepted a lot of good, or didn't accept any bad students. And then the reach school that you thought was going to be your reach went ahead and accepted a bunch of red flag students. So maybe the Mountain West isn't so bad. So I'm just saying that, like, I don't know necessarily that moving to the Mountain West or the Sun Belt should be out of the cards for any of us, especially UTSA and SMU and Memphis. The 3 of us should be evaluating our options constantly.
That's interesting. That is so interesting. I was going to ask, we'll swing back to that later. I wonder if SMU tries to jump out of the conference now that UNT and others are in. What do we know how this conference is broken down? Jared, I know you tweeted something about it. Is Navy going to be in the West is the first question. I mean, and you mentioned something about having UAB maybe go to the East or Memphis go to the East, but that would kind of be unfortunate either way, because we would lose a potential rivalry between the two, a geographical rival. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, Jared, do we know who, as far as like how the East and the West are broken up at this moment?
No, definitely not. And CJ, I believe the AAC is not even playing with divisions this season.
No. Right? Ever since UConn dropped, we went down to 11, and they're like, there's no point in division. So it's just rotating schedule.
Yeah, so it's definitely to be seen. I think one thing that could happen is maybe you do split the conference right there between Memphis and Birmingham, which is like the logical access to separate it horizontally. But then you give UAB and Memphis a protected cross-division game. You preserve the Battle of the Bones rivalry, which you just found out about today. They play over a golden or a bronze slab of ribs. How does UTSA get on that, man? Like, we'll play over a golden brisket or something. But no, I think it would make sense to do the protected cross division thing. Maybe the other option is, if you really want to make sure that rivalry stays intact without doing cross division, is you could have Tulane flip over to the East, but then Tulane would be pretty upset about that, because obviously most of the roster, well, not most, but probably 40-30% of the roster is from Texas. So losing that recruiting access would be pretty painful for them.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and say that I know that part of the reason Navy's always been in the West, and that was a request they made. So assuming that Oresco is going to keep up with honoring that request, they like to be in the Western part of the division because they recruit a lot in the Midwest and in like the Texas area. And so getting to play games in front of there, because obviously recruiting for service academies is different than traditional universities when it comes to football. And so that's one of the things that like they try to prioritize, because they're not getting a lot of players out of the Philadelphia area, I guess. So going to Temple doesn't really move the needle, but playing in Dallas and New Orleans, and I guess when was Cincinnati in the West? I don't remember.
No, I don't think so.
Memphis was in the West, back when they were getting those type of like Great Plains and Southeast and the Texas area, that was really what they were looking for. So that was a request they made. So I'd imagine that would stay.
Yeah, and I guess since there's going to be so many people like watching and listening to this that haven't really followed the American much, I guess we should state a few basic facts. Like Navy recruits like 20 kids out of Houston every year because they have those. They can recruit to their service academy. They're the prep academy, I guess. So for them to get access to Texas is really critical. But most importantly, they're a football only member. Wichita State replaces them in Olympic sports. So for them, like travel cost is completely negligible. I mean, because through the military, they can fly wherever they want. Like it's not like there's a real dollar on that other than our tax money. But they're not having to send like their Olympic sports down, to Dallas, 3 times a week or whatever, or 3 times a month rather. So that's why like for them, it's much more beneficial to play in Texas. And I think like they're such an important piece of this conference that you do have to kind of give them um, that ability to do that and to honor their request because they're a school that could go independent really easily. Like they probably have some of the most leverage in this conference on what they could do next. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of wanted to bring something up. And, we're all 3 alumni of 3 different schools that are all going to be in the same conference, God willing. I can't say that enough. Can't stress how happy I am, regardless of how CJ feels about it. Okay, so North Texas, UTSA, and SMU. For better or for worse, regardless if you guys want to accept it or even think about it, all 3 of us could have a new head coach very soon, just factually speaking. And Jared, really want to start off with you. How do you what's the feeling? Obviously, it's a great position to be in because Coach Traylor has been so successful. But is there a fear amongst the UTSA faithful? Is he going to get poached after this year? Or, again, he has this year and 2 other years on his contract. Is that correct?
They actually extended him for another year after that. So I think he's got 4 years left right now.
Okay. Well,
and I mean, it's
yeah,
an unspoken secret that they're going to give him a new contract moving to the AAC, I guess.
Someone's probably going to buy him out. If I had to guess, if I was a betting man, someone's going to buy him out. Maybe Tech, maybe Tech gets Dyke. I don't know. But what is the feeling? I'll start off with Jared, then we'll move up to CJ, obviously. But are you scared you're going to lose Coach Traylor? What's the thought on that?
I'm probably going to have a lot different opinion on this than most UTSA fans and alumni that you would talk to. First off, like I'm never that as worried about a coach getting poached as I am getting stuck with a coach who shouldn't be there anymore. So I mean, for me, like you get that buyout money and you just go get the next man up, right? Sometimes they're going to flame out, but that's where you want to be. Like you're showing coaches that you're a stepping stone to a better job. That's a good place to be. I think Jeff Traylor has an extremely limited market for his services. I really don't think any school outside of Texas would have any interest in them, and honestly, they probably shouldn't. I don't know if he could really go into Washington State and replace Nick Vobelich there and like have a ton of success being 3,000 miles away from Texas. It's really what he's built his whole career on is being one of the most trusted former high school coaches in the state of Texas. Now, I mean, there are certainly scenarios where I could see him leaving. If Dave Aranda goes to LSU, I think he would be a great fit at Baylor. I could totally see that happening. But at the end of the day, I think it's a tough sell if you're a Big 12 school to say we're going to go take the head coach at UTSA. Like your college football sickos that like have watched UTSA would be excited, but I think that's a really tough sell to your big money donors that you're going to go get the UTSA coach that's only been there 2 years and like hasn't won a bowl game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think it's a little bit early, but sure, it could certainly happen.
Awesome. And CJ, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I feel like between the 2 of us, like the short list for the Tech job are Dykes and Traylor, at least as far as the people that get paid to write about it. I feel like those are the 2 names that those people bring up the most.
Yeah,
and usually when
there's the easy names, yeah.
Yeah, well, because of the connection and because of the location. Those are 2 easy names to throw in a listicle all the time. And that's when I say that I'm worried about, crabs in a bucket pulling us down. That's where I'm worried about us not having that money that we might not have in the future in terms of like extending Coach Dykes. Like, I think he wants to stay here until he feels like he's maxed out what he can do here. Because that's something this time last year, maybe it is a little bit later, but, about 10 months ago, Snowy, we sat down and we talked about it. And you were like, are you worried, that Coach Dykes might end up at a Power 5 job? And I was like, I am not worried for a second. He is happy here. everything is trending SMU. Everything's coming up SMU. And then stuff has started coming up SMU. And I'm still very confident that he has no motivation to leave, but he does have potential incentive to leave. So even though he doesn't necessarily, and those, it's a pretty intricate balance to like toe that line between motivation and incentive. But there's definitely going to be some financial incentive potentially to leave if SMU doesn't have that money, if they don't want to pony up that type of cash for keeping him around, which they would be stupid not to, because he's the only thing that's. I mean, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but as far as I'm concerned, Rick Hart has made one decision that I look at and can like ostensibly say that was a good decision since he's been our athletic director, and that's hiring Sonny Dykes. So if he loses Sonny Dykes, he's lost like his one like without a doubt win like thing in the win column. So he would be crazy to let him go. Like unless it's just we cannot match that kind of money. Like it's just we are a whole 7 figures off. I don't think he can go anywhere, or we can let him go anywhere, but he definitely could, I guess, benefit from going elsewhere, especially with us being in the position we are now in Conference USA 2.0.
Yep. And obviously Seth Luttrell will, I mean, who knows? There's a bunch of logistics, behind closed doors, obviously, that we don't know about. But it's reasonably to think that this could be Seth Luttrell's last year at UNT. And obviously we're not scared about him being poached, but it's just probably good chance we're going to be in the market for a new head coach. And the fact that we are, again, probably next season, a season away from, joining a better conference. And like you said, Conference 2.0. I mean, nevertheless, it's still the American is a step up from Conference USA. But really want to make sure that we land somebody solid. I mean, there's a bunch of names that get kicked around in Todd Graham out of Hawaii, Nick Rolovich out of Washington State. Graham Harrell will always be a name that gets tossed around, and as well as Kendall Briles, the OC at Arkansas. So we'll see. I mean, regardless of whichever way that goes, if it goes any way at all, I mean, is it impossible to have Coach Luttrell for next year? No. But if we do, we really want to get somebody in there that knows how to win, who has been to has a lot of success or some success at least at the head coach position, I would think, or a hot shot OC or DC name coming in that can get us momentum, because we want to recruit with obviously SMU and all the other AAC teams. Moving forward in a successful campaign next year, I feel like would really help with that. So, Jared, want to pass it to you after this, talking about recruiting, and what do you think this is going to do for UTSA as far as a recruitment level goes, now that presumably not only will you guys be playing UNT year in and year out, but now SMU, that's 2 Metroplex schools that you guys could pitch to Metroplex kids of, hey, we're going to be up here, very frequently. And, but how do you think this is going to affect recruiting for UTSA?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it too much. I think you look at what Houston and SMU have been able to do with their recruiting, where they were able to go from getting those mid-tier 3 stars to those high 3 stars, and in some cases some 4 stars, even 5 stars. I don't know if UTSA is going to do that right out of the gate, but if they have sustained success in the American for a couple of years and they're playing on ESPN more frequently, then yeah, I mean, I think you got a better shot of keeping some of those kids in town. I think there's a middle linebacker at Converse Judson that's a pretty high 3 star that UTSA's had a lot of success recruiting that school and keeping kids from Judson to stay in San Antonio despite Power 5 offers. But I think he's still committed to Houston, right? So I think that's one of the example of like it just helps that hometown pool a little bit more to know like you're not going to be playing on Facebook Live and Stadium and stuff like that, because that stuff is used in negative recruiting. I think for UTSA it's just more like, can they get more facilities built? Is probably the main thing. But yeah, it'd be interesting. In some ways it might increase the competition for some of those San Antonio recruits, because now like Tulane's coming to play in San Antonio every week, so might help them take a couple of kids from San Antonio that maybe UTSA could get hold on to previously. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting more revenue and having more things in your program that this conference will be able to afford UTSA.
Right, absolutely. And CJ, obviously, you guys have already been on the right track as far as recruiting goes. Shout out to Coach Samples. But what do you think this does? Whether it be positive or negatively, as far as this new conference alignment, or are you concerned at all? Because I mean, you guys do have Preston Stone, and he's a pretty good recruiting factor in himself, a little magnet to attract other recruits. Because I mean, it's if we're being honest, I mean, there's no reason to think you guys won't be successful for many years to come with, a quarterback coming in to replace Mordecai whenever he should leave with the caliber of what Stone is. But yeah, what are your thoughts on recruitment, CJ, going forward?
I mean, I think the biggest asset we have is the staff that has bought into the program. And that's something you can tell. Like, just generally to speak about the staff, because I think that's like the base of recruiting is who's your staff. So let's address, base up and we'll get there. So as far as the staff goes, I feel like how infrequently people leave when they have job offers is a good sign that like everybody's 2 feet down bought in. And so I think that as a result, that kind of trickles down to the recruiting trail of people. It's they're 17-year-old kids, but I think they have a pretty good idea when they're being sold a bill of goods. Like I think they're smarter than we give them credit for. And so I think as a result, they can tell when somebody actually means what they're saying, when it's not some guy that's in his third OC job in 7 years where he's just climbing the ladder and he's, going through like the checklist of here are the things I need to pitch to get him in the door versus here we talk about being a family and how everybody feels close. And that's something that a lot of the high 3-stars, when you talk about what's different, they talk about the relationship that the staff has with players. Very few people talk about like the schemes we run when it comes to why they should be there. And I think it comes down to the fact that like, and maybe this is, giving away too much, but like we recruit the person, not the player. And if that's like giving away too much because other teams are just catching on, like that's shame on them for not knowing that. But I feel like that's what it comes down to. So I'm not worried about it until, like I mentioned, revenue starts to go down, our ability to pay for these staff members because they're between inflation and the fact that they're doing is very, very difficult to do at a sustained level at the G5 level. If that revenue goes down and then we can't pay them, then that will hinder our recruiting. But I think for now, I'm not too worried about them being like, well, I was really looking forward to you seeing us playing UCF in Cincinnati every year, but now we're playing Charlotte and Rice, and that just doesn't move the needle for me. I don't think that matters too much based on how recruits have talked about SMU and people that have gotten to SMU and why did you pick SMU over Power 5 offers? And they list all the reasons, and none of them are, who we play or the fact that we're on ESPN more than the Conference USA. So I'm not worried for now, but I'm not saying there are red flags up, but like some yellow flags, if that's a thing. Like I'm concerned for 5 years down the line, but for these next like 2 or 3 recruiting cycles, I think the train should keep rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're onto something there. And really quick, I know this is kind of random, but you'll have to excuse me for 1 second. I've got to run to the restroom. But while I leave, if you guys, I'm going to pass it to Jared, and then Jared, you can pass it up to CJ, and I'll come back and grab the Spark Notes. But obviously, I know we're all fans of our schools, but realistically, as far as Jared and then CJ, what is your guys? Obviously, I know the hope is to go undefeated, but what is your guys' realistic prediction for your school's record at the end of the year, as well as who would you realistically want to see in a bowl game? Again, I'm going to pass that to Jared, and then Jared, if you'll pass it up to CJ, and then I will be right back. And I want to hear again the Spark Notes. I'll probably catch that from you, Jared, if you can jot down what CJ says, and I'll be right back.
I'll try.
Okay.
Oh gosh. So I picked UTSA, I think, to go 9-3 at the beginning of the year, which at the time I thought was kind of high, but they've already had 2 wins that I thought they were going to lose in the preseason. So I guess I got to bump it up to 10-2. I don't know. 11-1 is definitely on the table, at least like in games they're going to be favored in. As far as a bowl opponent, it's a good one. I think losing to Lafayette and the New Orleans Bowl would be a hell of a lot of fun. And it's probably not possible to drink New Orleans dry, but I think those 2 fan bases would get pretty close.
It's a good answer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess for me, like as far as SMU goes, I mean, so FPI has us about somewhere between 25 and 30%. I mean, coming into the season, they only had us about a 10% chance to beat Cincinnati, but now we're up to about a 30% chance. I don't see why, like 10-2 should be the floor. We've historically been subpar in November, so like that game against Tulsa makes me a little concerned because Tulsa is an annoying team to play, and we've struggled against them later in the season. Really, any time of the season, we've struggled with Tulsa in the last few years. Their defense just matches up really well against what we like to do offensively. So that's a concern. But yeah, so 10-2, like as a floor, I don't see why we couldn't do that. But realistically speaking, I don't see why 11-1 shouldn't be like the most likely outcome. Obviously, we'd like to go undefeated. I have heard the phrase thrown around a whole lot in my life that it's hard to beat a team twice. So, either if let's say we do end up losing one game this year and it's hard to beat a team twice, so we end up splitting with Cincinnati in whatever universe, I would love to bring home a conference championship because that's banners fly forever, even when you're the Houston Astros. So like that's the type of thing that that I would love to have. And then as far as bowl opponents go, I mean, hell, if we win the AAC, even at 12-1, like I really hope Coastal slips up somewhere because like I don't think that they're the best G5, even if like we in Cincinnati split. Like I just don't think the schedule they've played. I mean, Sagarin has them at 159th in strength of schedule. That means there are at least 29 FCS teams with a better strength of schedule than Coastal Carolina right now. So that's something that like based on who they play, I don't think they deserve that New Year's Six spot if we end up playing spoiler to Cincinnati. So obviously I'd love to be in a New Year's Six bowl. I would love to get the opportunity. I mean, really in the New Year's Six bowl, I'd love to get the opportunity to play anybody just because getting there would be huge. Some teams just off the top of my head that I think I'd love to see. I would love to see Texas A&M if they can keep winning. I don't think there's any reason why a 2-loss Texas A&M gets left out of Year Six bowl. I would love that. Much like how UNT kind of sets their sights on SMU every year. If we could set our sights on UT or A&M every year, if that's like a thing we could do if we were in the same conference, we absolutely would. But really, my bowl wants are just not the Frisco Bowl. I just don't want to play in the Frisco Bowl. Like I just want to play whoever in like the Birmingham or Fenway Bowl, like whoever we can get a Power 5 opponent against. If we can't play in the New Year's Six, like just give me North Carolina in the Fenway Bowl or Boston College in the Fenway Bowl, NC State in the Fenway Bowl, Ole Miss in the Ole Miss is probably better than the Birmingham Bowl, but like Tennessee in the Birmingham Bowl. Like there are a lot of quality Power 5 teams we could play in a bowl game. It's just a question of will we, and I don't know.
All right, so I think 11-1 from CJ with maybe an A&M bowl matchup. If that's correct. Jared, what did you say?
So preseason I was 9-3, but they've already won 2 games. I thought they would lose in the preseason, so I'm gonna jump up to 10-2. But 11-1 is probably likely if you look at if are they gonna be favored in Vegas or not. But those UTEP Miners, they look pesky, man. I don't know. They're gonna be pissed off.
They do, and you made the comment you don't want to face a UNT after a fresh firing of Seth Ochoa with a pissed off interim coach. So
yeah,
you never know. I mean that
dangerous.
would be, it could be a little viper there. I really don't know. It's kind of a silly question. Maybe one of you guys know what's happening with Houston. Do either one of you guys know?
What do you mean, like them going to the Big 12?
Oh, they're going. Oh, I didn't hear that. Okay, so that's what I missed. So Houston's going to the Big 12, and that's going to be in effect as far as whenever we come into the American. Is that
Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF?
I didn't know Houston was a part of that little trio. Yeah. That's interesting. Wow, I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah, just ask any SMU or Memphis fan how they feel about it. They're not thrilled.
Yeah, I bet they're not. I mean, I guess just that market, though. I mean, they're the lone school down there, or the biggest school down there.
It's the timing of it all. That's what happened. Is they were really good from like that 2015 to 2017 range. The last time that people made their pitches for joining the Big 12, and that stuck with the people in the room at the Big 12, and they've treaded water, I guess you could say. I mean, they've been like a 7 or 8 win team. They got blown out by. They lose to? Is it Nevada that they lost to last year in their bowl game? I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't. No. They lost to Hawaii last year.
Oh yeah, that's right. Nevada blew out Tulane. It was a bad year for the AAC in bowl games. Let's be honest. So that was that's something that their timing was just really good. I mean, UT and OU kicking off that domino about 2 years earlier than people were expecting in terms of the next round of realignment kind of put SMU and Memphis in a weird spot, because like I think Memphis was a year or two away from like surpassing Houston as far as like being a threat to jump into the P5, and I think that SMU is about 2 years away, because right now like we talk about all like the momentum we have recruiting, but like those guys are still in high school. Like they haven't done anything until they've stepped on campus. So that's where I think that just like the timing of it really kind of benefited Houston more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I did a little poll, when UNT gets into the American, who will be their biggest rival. We'll go over that really quick and then go over questions. And then if Jared or CJ, if you guys have anything that we need to address that I forgot to mention, then we'll go over that as well. But okay, so as far as the poll goes, we got 138 votes, 66% saying SMU will be our bigger rival than UTSA. So I want to send a few things your guys' way. One, I personally always viewed SMU as the lesser of the rival between. I viewed UTSA more of a rival because SMU again was a conference up than us. I was just like, you know what, forget it. If we lose to them, as much as I want to win, and as much as as UNT views it more than a rivalry than SMU, I'll concede that for right now. If we lose, we kind of have that to fall back on. We're not in the same conference, whatever. But UTSA, we are in the same conference. I just feel like since UTSA is their football program has kicked off, there's been just so many contentious games. Mm-hmm. And I know by speaking to a plethora of UNT players from years past, they have a distinct dislike for UTSA. And I would assume the same would be for the UTSA players of years past. So now that we're moving into a new conference, it just seems, again, from the 138 votes that we got, the poll is saying that SMU will be a bigger rival. So, Jared, wanted to ask you, get your thoughts on that. I mean, how much do you think a rivalry will UNT, UTSA still be? I think it'll still be pretty significant. And then could you see yourself or UTSA being a rival with SMU in years to come?
Well, I think rivalries are hard to. Man, I'm sorry, I'm gonna upset your viewers, but rivalries don't really count if one team wins every single week or every year. Sorry. It just is what it is, right? I
That's
think
true.
UTSA and UNT have been on pretty equal footing. Like you said, it seems like every time these teams play, it leads to a coach getting fired. It leads to someone making the conference championship game. It leads to a quarterback losing their season. I mean, every single game that these two teams have played have had some. Sorry, my cat decided to make interference. But every single game these two teams have played have had extremely high stakes, even in seasons where there was really not much on the table from a big picture. It tends to predict the trajectory of the two teams based on the outcome of that game for the following years. So I don't see the UTSA UNT rivalry going away at all. I think it's going to stay really strong. I could see UTSA and SMU developing a rivalry. I think these two fan bases are going to hate each other, like bitter hate, like drastic. Like you guys, man, once you start getting some UTSA followers on Twitter, y'all are just gonna, whew. But UTSA has to compete, right? And it's gonna be difficult. I mean, SMU's roster is way more talent loaded than UTSA's. As high as I am on UTSA's talent right now, SMU's on a different planet, and the classes they have coming in, totally different stratosphere, right? So if UTSA can pull some upsets early on, then yeah, I could see it happening. But for now, I think UNT and UTSA is going to stay pretty heated for sure.
Very interesting. And yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I mean, we have not played UTSA yet, so I haven't seen it from a fan's perspective as far as going up against UTSA, but I do know SMU, as far as currently, they do have some firepower with Mordecai at the trigger and other plethora of receivers. But anyway, CJ, what do you think as far as, that statement goes? And I mean, I know SMU may not view UNT as a rival, and because, as Jared said, it's got to be somewhat equal in the win and loss column, which it's not right now. But could you imagine, just imagine this, 2023 UNT, first year in the AAC, somehow we upset SMU, assuming it's an upset at that time, how obnoxious the UNT fans would be towards the SMU fans. And I feel like that could almost like, oh my gosh, like screw these guys, you know what I mean? But so you guys view it as a lesser of a rivalry, not really too much of a rivalry as of now. But again, hypothetically, if that upset was to happen in 2 years, what do you think of what the SMU UNT rivalry could potentially be?
Well, that depends. I mean, in this timeline, are we not looking for the first escape pod out of the AAC? I mean, I guess that would assume that we are fully committed to being in the AAC. That would also require you guys to beat us, which based on how it's going, I just don't know. I mean, it would take a big upset. I mean, ULM was 32.5-point underdogs when they won. And according to SP Plus, if if North Texas and SMU were to kick off tomorrow, SMU would be 19-point favorites. So that's, 30 points. It's more likely for it to happen than that game that took place just last week was. But no, I mean, I feel like you're trying to bait me into like calling y'all obnoxious. I don't have any ill will against UNT fans. I said it the last time and the time before that when I was on your show. I've never had an issue with UNT fans. Now during game week, they like to like get all riled up with me. It doesn't bother me. I have fun with it. And to what Jared said about like you could see some bitter hatred, I could see it too. I posted this morning about like how I woke up to like a dozen new CUSA followers, and it's bittersweet. It's sweet because like I love getting new followers. It's bitter because it made me realize that we made a ton of progress in the last 5 years, and we're in a worse spot than we were in 2011 when we were just like barely a bowl team. And the only people that had negative feedback were UTSA fans. And I was like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I wanted UTSA as part of the conference realignment. Like, I know you're new to my page, but I've been saying for the last few months, like, the short list should be UAB, UTSA, and then the 3 Sunbelt teams that I want to add. But ESPN didn't want to let us add those Sunbelt teams. It's like the only reasonable explanation for us adding 6 CUSA teams and no Sunbelt teams. But anyways, so like I'm not really – I don't want the smoke from anybody right now because I want to like be able to make my own judgments on this. I feel like a lot of times like with social media and stuff, like just on a meta conversation, it can be such an echo chamber. And like I try to stay separated from that because otherwise, if I didn't, like I would be wanting to shut down the football program. Like there are some SMU fans, and it's a growing contingent that are like melting down right now. And it's like, think about what the best case scenario is. Think about what the worst case scenario is. Throw those out. Those never happen. They basically never happen. I mean, sometimes they happen. Sometimes you run a Hail Mary where the plan is to tip the ball in the end zone and it works out like it did against Louisiana Tech. But most likely that ball gets batted down. Most likely it's not worst case or best case. We're somewhere in between. So like maybe we end up in the Mountain West because after a couple of years we're like, this is not good. We need to bail and we want to be in the next Pac-12 expansion. And so that starts by playing in their time zone. Or maybe we go to the Sun Belt and say, the Fun Belt's been kicking butt. They're still cruising. So we want to join them. There's just so many possibilities right now that I don't want to go like pigeonholing myself into saying that all UNT fans suck because they don't. I mean, outside of the game week where they're just like unnecessarily obnoxious, like I'm cool with all of y'all on there. I might be the only SMU fan that like has no issue. Like I'm cool with UCF fans. That's a fan base most people like do not get along with. I'm an honorary UCF Twitter Mafia member.
Oh, you'll be fine with UTSA. If you can handle UCF Twitter, you'll be fine with UTSA Twitter.
Not only can I handle UCF Twitter, I'm a part of UCF Twitter. So I might end up becoming a part of Meet Nation by the end of this week. I don't know.
Love it.
But as far as when we talked about talent, right now SP Plus has SMU about 7 points better than UTSA. So when we talk about like the talent difference, that's definitely a part of it. So
yeah, and that's the best UTSA team of all time too, right? Like UTSA is probably going to lose 20 to 30 seniors, as crazy as that is to say. The recruiting has gotten better for them. That's going to be a big gap to replace. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, this is the best SMU team in a long time as well. I mean, there were obviously those years under June Jones where like we looked pretty good. We made AAC USA championship game, lost it of course, but we still made one. And then. I mean, but since then, it's just really been a lot of bleakness. But like now we're also in one of the best spots. And I don't think we're losing quite 20 to 30 seniors, but I think it's going to be close. I mean, we had a lot of super seniors, but not like too many. But we did have a good bit. And like when y'all talk about talent, I feel pretty confident that like most of our twos would start for both of y'all, except for a couple positions. Like we can start right off the bat. Preston Stone would start at either place. I think that when TJ McDaniel gets healthy, he would start at either place. Or you can look at Trey Siggers. I mean, he didn't fully start at UNT, but he got a significant number of carries.
He was one of the best players, yeah.
Exactly. And then like when you go through our receivers, like all of our twos, they start for us some games. So like obviously the defense as far as talent goes might be a little bit lacking compared to the offense. Although we do have a lot of, especially young guys, we have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. I still think that a lot of those twos would start. So yeah, I mean, that's just something that's going to be about keeping the staff that can develop those guys. And that's like, if anybody after like 40 minutes can take anything away, I'm just really worried about like the term. Can we keep the guys we need to keep the momentum going? I'm not worried about, the train like abruptly stopping. It's trains take like a mile to stop. That's why they tell you never try to like race the thing that's coming down when like a train's coming, because they take a mile to stop. But once they get stopped, it's really hard to get going again. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of, all right, jumping into comments and questions. We got a lot of comments here, and if I say anything that you guys can remember and want to hop on, by all means, and then I'll get to the questions. But Travis Hunt, not a rival, if not mutual. I'm assuming that's probably SMU UNT.
It is, yeah. I can jump in there. Travis, he was on. I actually wasn't aware of like who he was, and then I posted something about like our all-time winning percentage and made it like a running graphic so you could see how it was going. And he was apparently on the 03 team. I don't know.
Oh,
I believe he was on like from like 02 to 05, but he used to play for SMU. I don't know in what capacity. Based on the fact that I didn't know the name, I can't imagine he was like, like a captain or a starter or anything, but he was on the team for 4 years. So
interesting. And then we got Butch. SMU doesn't see UTSA as a rival, which I agree as of now. We'll see whenever we're all in the same conference. Beating SMU is their mountaintop, and losing to UTSA is their valley. That's from Pastor. He doesn't really seem. I can't really tell which school he's affiliated or a fan.
I think that's a UTSA fan.
Okay, so beating SMU is their mountaintop, and losing to UT. I guess he's talking about North Texas. I'm guessing. And then Coach Wally Rigg, he's a North Texas fan. It's two different kinds of a rivalry. And I asked him, which win or loss would you feel would mean more? He said beating SMU all day, every day. I would agree. I don't want to lose to UTSA, especially not this year. I would love nothing more than to ruin everything as a fan of North Texas. But with a clean slate, new fresh season, we're all in the same conference. I would take a win over SMU. And then a loss to UTSA. If I had to pick one or the other, I would agree with that. And then we had one other one. If I can find it here. DJ Rowdy, our rival is University Houston Cougars. I guess I'm not sure if either one of you guys know DJ Rowdy's a fan of, but
I think he might be a Houston fan, actually.
Yeah, maybe.
No, DJ Rowdy's definitely UTSA. Rowdy is UTSA's.
Is y'all's rival the Cougars? Is there any?
No.
Okay, well, God bless DJ Rowdy. All right, so then moving over to the questions. This is from Jacob Huggins. How much will the annual athletic budget increase for UTSA and UNT, once they are in the AAC? I don't know the answer to that question. Jared and or CJ, and we'll go with Jared and then CJ. Do y'all have any ballpark idea of? I know there is an incentive, a fiscal incentive from going from Conference USA to the Athletic, but I don't really know as far as numbers go. Do either one of you guys happen to know that one?
I could give a best guess.
Okay.
UNT has a lot less work to do in that department than UTSA does. I think UNT's operating budget right now is around 40 million, something like that. Average AAC budget, post the 3 Big 12 teams leaving, is in the 40 to 60 range, right? So UNT is already in the ballpark. Anything that they do from here on out's gravy. I mean, they're a well-funded program. They haven't put it together in the football field yet, but you look at their facilities, you look at all the success they've had in sports other than football, and they're doing what they need to do, right? Not that I'm not trying to say that they don't need to increase their budget, because clearly they do. They're not winning at football. But UTSA, on the other hand, they've got a long way to go. I think right now they're at 32 million a year in athletic spending. That's pretty good, 20-30% below the average, right? So they've got a lot of work to do. Their facilities are woefully under par for the American. They've got a really great football facility that just opened up this year. That was the first, domino to fall, you got to start with football, obviously. But now baseball and softball desperately need new facilities. We should be seeing some plans for those and some fundraising initiatives start pretty soon. They need to cover the football field and put that covered pavilion up. There's some upgrades that need to happen to the soccer facility so they can do broadcast from there. And then, of course, I haven't even talked about basketball. You guys are probably well aware UTSA's basketball arena is just pathetic. It's just like a hunk pile of rust. I mean, it's so bad. They didn't even play high school playoff games in the Convocation Center, right? I mean, how do you get a San Antonio three-star basketball crew to stay home when he doesn't play in that gym for his high school playoffs? And that is probably a decade away, right? That they're probably going to look at off-campus, arrangements. So yeah, UTSA's got a lot of their work cut out for them, but if they keep competing at the level they are in football, things are going to work out. They've got a super young alumni base. They've got great business and engineering programs that, typically people graduate from those and make pretty good money. So a lot of work to be done on the UTSA side, but I think UNT is going to be okay as far as budget goes.
CJ, any thoughts on that question?
Well, I know that when y'all get to the American, you're going to be taking a decreased, like you're going to be taking a prorated rate basically in terms of like payout from like the football side of things. I'm not sure how that factors in terms of like where that fits into like the operating budget for each school. I don't really know about how the whole business works, which that's why, again, I really want to reiterate that when I kind of took almost like a stray shot at our athletic director, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. All I know is I'm unhappy.
To give a little context for Conference USA teams, they made about $400,000 to $500,000 per year on the TV contract. So for them to only get 2 to 3 million is a 4x increase.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. Is I know that you guys are going to go way up now as a result.
Yeah, and also when you keep in mind like conference affiliation, TV contract money is actually like not that big portion of like the total payouts because you got your NCAA tournament payouts. Houston went to the Final Four this year. That money stays in the conference. That's going to get paid out to the schools. I don't know how that part of it is going to be handled for the incoming schools. Like, I don't know if that gets prorated as well. But the TV contract is like a pretty minimal part of the actual like revenue that goes into it, and it's also very normal for incoming schools to get pro rates. That's pretty much the norm for any conference. So I saw a lot of people report that and kind of react to that on Twitter in a very negative fashion. I think it's like a 2 to 3 year thing. I think the bigger concern is what happens to the contract as a whole when those 3 Big 12 schools leave, and theoretically if other teams were to leave as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty concerned about that as well, Jared. Yeah. But as if I haven't made that abundantly clear, that's my main concern. But no, I mean, I do want to take a second to talk about basketball because I know that's been like a thing that some COSA teams have brought up in terms of the why is everybody so upset. And I won't go naming any names like North Texas, for example, but that's something that has been brought up is, well, what about basketball success? And I want to talk a little bit about the payout structure for basketball because that I am a little bit more familiar with because that's something that I feel like is the biggest, I guess, like miss that people make in terms of arguments is they like to point out basketball. I don't think that really plays a role in the conversations. It's the second biggest sport they talk about, but I think it's like 80% football, 10% basketball, 10% the rest of the sports. Maybe it's more like 80-15-5, but it's football dwarfs basketball in terms of the conversations because Houston made the Final Four. They paid out to the AAC, great, but like you only get paid out based on how far you make it. So these guys who, let's be honest, as an athletic director, there are only about 100 or so good jobs in the country, like 100 jobs that pay, we're talking upper class money. And that's what they're personally incentivized to keep doing a good job. It's a lot safer to take whatever money you're making from football than rolling the dice and hoping you don't get upset by some Cinderella in basketball. Like Kansas hasn't made the Final Four in how long? But they're, they're going to get to go to the Big Ten because of football or because of basketball. Sorry. They're not. Like, it's such a roll of the dice when it comes to March Madness that, like, yes, it's nice that Houston made it to the Final Four, but that's almost like if you're planning on a team making the Final Four, that's like betting on a specific number in roulette. Like, if you put all of your savings on one number in roulette, like, you're either going to be very happy you did, or more likely than not, you're going to lose everything if you're staking your reputation and your claim on basketball. So that's why I just want to kind of, I guess, bring up a little bit about basketball, because I'm glad you brought it up, Jared, because I don't love it when people talk about basketball as like that's going to be the ringer. Like, you have to be pretty comparable in football for basketball to push you over the edge, in my opinion, because these athletic directors are so incentivized to do the safe thing and take the marginally better football team because of how much more money that brings in on a yearly basis.
Interesting. Okay, so the next question coming in from Ryan Payne, it says, who stands to gain the most from this conference realignment? I'll tee off with, obviously, North Texas. I think from a national standpoint, our recruiting will go up. We are going up in a conference. I mean, is it as dramatic as when TCU went into the Big 12 from the Mountain West? Of course not. But when they did go up into the Big 12, I mean, their recruiting went up. I mean, they're playing OU, they're playing Texas, whatever. Again, am I saying that is what's happening with North Texas going to the American? Of course not. But again, we are playing Navy, we are playing SMU, UAB. I mean, still in there, Memphis, and we are going up, in our brand, and that's something that we can pitch to recruits. I mean, we are. CJ may not feel this way, but I mean, up until currently, I mean, the AAC is the Power Six, and we can hopefully try to sell that idea and keep that momentum going. I mean, whatever you think, CJ, we want to come in and contribute. Whether that will happen or not, time will tell. But we want to keep the American as good as it is, and we're excited to be a part of it. So hopefully that will help with our recruiting. But yeah, and then he also added into that. He says, obviously, UTSA, UNT have their obvious reasons of why they're excited, but SMU is now presumably the top dog in the AAC, which they could win out, or they could be a top dog in the conference. So again, to just keep that in the back of your head whenever it gets up to you. But Jared, want to spin that down to you as far as the base question of who stands to gain the most from this conference realignment.
Are we limiting this to AAC teams or anybody?
Ooh, good question. Go ahead and do both.
I can do both. I can do both.
Yeah, do both.
I think biggest winner is Rice. No one had them on the radar at all for the AAC. Seems like the only reason they got in is because there was concern that Mountain West might take Texas schools. So they just we'll take them all and we'll block off your eastern flank. Interesting strategy. We'll see how that plays out long term. I think Charlotte also, they've been looking for a spark, and I think having some regional rivals for them is going to really help them grow that program and grow their fan interest, their alumni engagement. Biggest losers, man, Temple got screwed. I don't see how Temple has any excitement over any of these additions. Really tough spot for them. And then outside of the AAC, man, my heart goes out for UTEP, man. That's awful. They have their best program in their best season in 2 decades. And no one wants them. They're left on a geographical island, even worse than they were before. It seems like they have no real chance of getting or staying in any conference. I think there's a chance Conference USA just cuts them and turns it to an Eastern League. So I feel really bad for all the minor bros out there. It's a tough scene, man. I don't think they deserve that for as bad as they've been in football. It's a very proud program with a lot of positives. It just, the geography just doesn't work for them.
Interesting. And CJ, yeah, spinning it up to you, and also keep in mind as far as what Ryan said, as far as you guys being the top dog, and is there any pluses in that, and thinking you guys could run the conference for a few years, presumably, and hopefully from a SMU's perspective?
I mean, we got to do it first. I mean, the last conference championship game we made was when we were in the Conference USA. So let's not go getting out ahead of our skis here with we're going to run this conference. I mean, I think we are, but I don't want to go make that proclamation and 3 years into this new thing, we're still, we're just almost there like we've been these last couple of years. I do like what Jared said about UTEP. I hadn't really considered the fact that they're on an island. I think that goes back to the point I made about timing. If they had this year 2 years ago and kept that momentum going, I don't think we're talking about them as being cut by the Conference USA. I think we're looking at them as, if the Mountain West looks to add a team, they might be somebody, if they look to add 2 teams, they might be one of the teams they add. So that's certainly interesting. I also feel bad for UTEP that we added Rice specifically so that the Mountain West couldn't expand into Texas, and then we just didn't add UTEP. It was we don't want you getting any Texas schools, and UTEP was
yeah.
Oh. So I feel for them there. I mean, biggest winners, a name you didn't bring up that right away I think is the biggest winner outside of when we talk biggest winners, Rice, UNT, you're the biggest winner because when you asked me about conference realignment like a month ago, Sonoe, I was like, there's no way UNT is getting in. They have so many people in front of them. Same thing with Rice. I think FAU
remember.
is the biggest winner. I think FAU is by far the biggest winner because they are filling a void that UCF is going to leave behind in the state of Florida. UCF for a while, like when we talk about Houston and SMU finally starting to break into like those upper 3 stars, UCF was really starting to get there because schools like Florida and Florida State and Miami, just like not so much Florida, but Florida State and Miami haven't really been the school like the schools that y'all grew up with and that I saw like the tail end of. I think that's like that really played in UCF's favor. They played an exciting style of offense. I mean, obviously FAU looks a little different since the lane train has left the station, but for the most part, like FAU is kind of seen almost as like I think they're seen similarly to how UCF was seen when UCF joined the AAC. And I wouldn't be surprised if 6 or 7 years from now, we're looking at FAU as a team that in whatever the AAC East looks like is a 9 or 10 win team that nobody wants to play because defensively they play with a swagger and offensively they can put points up on the board. So that's something I feel like they are a big winner because like they've always just kind of been in a weird spot because they were a newer program for a while and then they were an independent and then they were, or I don't think they were ever an independent, but they were in the Sun Belt, which never felt right. And then they were in the CUSA and they just never really got their bearings down because they're kind of in no man's land in Florida if you're not in the ACC or SEC. But now I feel like they have that opportunity. The blueprint's been laid by UCF, so I think they're big winners. Big losers.
So real quick to add on to just to add on extra FAU perspective, for them to replace their travel partner and the divisional rival going from Florida International to USF is a massive upgrade. I know USF is like the laughing stock of the AAC right now, and for good reason. Like they have screwed up a lot and made a lot of bad decisions, but they are a million times better than FIU. FIU is a joke of a program that like shouldn't even be Division One, right? So just by that, the proximity and the association between those is really going to boost FAU. And I think it's going to help USF as well because like they haven't been able to compete with UCF, but they'll be able to compete with FAU and have like good entertaining games. So I think that's going to work out pretty well for both programs.
Well, sorry to my Bulls bros, but I had completely forgotten about y'all when I was making that whole that diatribe about FAU. That soliloquy I just gave about how FAU is going to be big winners. I completely forgot about USF. I thought FAU had the state to themselves. That's a mental lapse of sorts.
You know they're down bad when you just forget their conference.
We played them like 2 weeks ago. They're our second most recent opponent.
Oh man. Yikes.
But yeah, biggest loser. I think ECU is a big loser. I think they've been moving in the right direction, and Charlotte just kind of clogs things a little bit, almost in a way that like FAU doesn't for USF or vice versa. Like I feel like that market's almost like not too small, but like they're going to be kind of inexorably linked. That's a hard word to say. I don't know why I tried it. They're going to be inexorably linked, but like sort of like how FAU and FIU were. Like I feel like that's kind of what ECU and Charlotte are about to become. And the problem is Charlotte is a relatively young program, don't have a lot of funding, don't have a lot of not institutions. This has been going on a while. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word. Their facilities, that's the word, aren't I would say up to snuff with a bunch of the rest of the AAC. They'll get there though. They're moving in the right direction. I think Coach Healy's done a great job there. So like in the long term, I think it's okay, but in the short term, I think ECU is definitely going to suffer. I think biggest losers, SMU and Memphis, both are losers in the fact that like our best option might not be staying in the conference that we've put a lot of energy into trying to win. Like again, I cannot emphasize enough. If we can go to the Mountain West or the Sun Belt, and it looks like that is like potentially better for long-term financial success, that is 100% what we should do. We should have no loyalty to the American because the American was supposed to act in our best interests, and they did not. Because there are teams on the board. I will reiterate that I don't think they are in the American now or will be in 2023 or whenever because ESPN said, no, we want you pursuing the Conference USA because we already have the Sun Belt properties. And that's one of those situations where like I get Oresco is not even a big dog at the with ESPN because like he's never made the playoffs. So it's not like he can say we're part of your playoff structure. We're part of the thing you've invested billions in. But that's where he needs to put his foot down and say, we'll go halfway. We'll add 3 of the CUSA teams. We'll get you those big markets. We'll get you the Charlotte market. We'll get you Florida with FAU, and we'll get you the Southeast with UAB. But we're adding on some teams from the Sun Belt that are better programs. And again, I don't know the conversations that were had, but they didn't do the things they needed to do for the sake of making the conference better. Now, if that wasn't their objective, and their objective was do exactly what ESPN wants, then they probably succeeded and succeeded well. And good for them on that, because they get paid to do their job. If that's what their job was, great. But that's not what I think their job should be. So the biggest loser are the people that got screwed over the most by that. And I see that as SMU and Memphis, because we just went from being in a conference that a couple years ago, the SP plus of the AAC was higher than the ACC if you removed UConn, who was in their farewell tour. So that's like, we were a year removed from Power Six being like realistic, even though nobody gave it credence. And it's like now people are starting to give it credence and it's no longer true. So that's something that that's why I think we're the biggest loser, just to give a long-winded answer on that one.
Very
I will
interesting.
point out that both Memphis and SMU athletic directors were on the expansion committee.
Exactly. That's why I think
That's true.
partially that they're straw men in this whole thing, which I might not be using that correctly, but I think they are, maybe fall guys is a better word to describe it. I think it's more so the AAC brass put them in a room and we're like, put this all together and figure it out. And then we gave them a list of names and it was basically like, all right, thank you. Now I'm going to not listen to any of the good advice and listen to the, my feet are being held to the fire. So I'm going to take the best of the options. So if we put those 3 Sunbelt teams 1 through 3 and then put the other 6, 4 through 9, it might've just been that ESPN came and said, all right, talk to teams 4 through 9, 1 through 3 are off limits. So they might have done it. And the fact that the AAC hasn't come out and been like, this was a decision made between, all of these different groups. Obviously, it's still very early. This news broke just last night. But I'll be interested to see the AAC's response, because if the AAC stays relatively quiet in terms of how the decision was made, then my guess is this was more of a TV decision. If this is the type of thing where the AAC comes out and is like, yeah, listen, we put a bunch of heads in the room, we all came to a consensus decision, and this is it. And if all the athletic directors kind of own up to it almost, then I'll trust it. But if everybody kind of has their tail between their legs and are, we're still the Power Six, we still believe in, conference unity going forward, the statement, everybody almost like he's still our coach for now, right? A week before the coach gets fired.
Yeah.
That type of statement, then I'll be a little bit more concerned for their, I guess thinking or their mental sanity in terms of making sound decisions. But until then, I am just assuming this was purely a TV play, and those were the 4 people that were tasked with being on the committee to make the best out of a bad situation.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And if you guys have gotten this is our last question, and unless you guys have gotten some questions, DM to you guys specifically, because I think Jared, this person meant to DM you, but DM'd me. The question is, so I will just direct it to you, Jared. And so it'll just be a Jared question. But anyway, so the question it's from Michael Lascon, UTSA 2010, assuming he went to UTSA in 2010 or graduated in 2010, whatever. I said, Jared, are you concerned that we will get outmoneyed in the athletic conference? UNT and SMU both have bigger pockets than our program, and we have done such great things with less. Are you concerned that we will lose that in a bigger market? So yeah, Jared, take that away, if you will.
That's kind of an interesting question to answer, because immediately, yes, of course, UTSA is going to have a lot less money, right? There's no doubt about it. But you look at what UTSA has done in 10 years, and you just forecast that out for the next 10 years. I was listening to Pete Thamel on a San Antonio radio interview today, and he said there's nothing stopping UTSA from being the next Cincinnati, stopping them from being the next UCF, the next Louisville. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Obviously, you have to have things break your way, and you got to have people continue to buy in. But UTSA was not one of the biggest budget schools in Conference USA, and they still found their way into the American Conference, and they still found their way to be competitive for the most part. And I think UTSA's had a lot of things just go their way, and maybe that luck runs out at some point. But I think they have good leadership. I think they have good administration. I think they have the right people backing them. It's just going to take more growth for this program, and it's going to get there eventually.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so I think that's all we've got, for questions and everything. And that's all I have. But Jared or CJ, do you guys have anything else you want to add before we hop off here?
I'll let Jared go first. You go ahead.
CJ, what school are you most excited for joining AAC?
Well, I think FAU is fun. I mean, it is UTSA, I think, is like the one I'm most excited about.
Okay.
I think UAB is the school I'm going to look at like 5 or 6 years from now. I'm going to be like, wow, they've had 40 wins in the last 4.5, 5 years. Like they've been like a sleeper 8-win team consistently.
They
Although,
haven't got that P5 win.
What's up?
They haven't got that P5 win, so they've kind of been under the radar outside of Conference USA.
That's all right. It's not like our bowl tie-ins are going to be to P5 teams anytime soon. Once that realignment happens, that's one where I'm not thrilled. It's going to be a lot of us playing. It's going to be a lot of us going, I hope we can get Marshall, so at least we get a 9-win G5 team. How does this happen? Sorry, maybe this is just me. I'm starting to go insane. I just don't know how this happens. Anyways, I did have somebody. Part of the reason I've been bringing up the whole Mountain West and Sunbelt Escape Pod for so long, I had somebody DM me and they're like, "I really want you to bring this up," and I was like, "All right, man, you're the only one to reach out, so I guess like I'll do it for you." I do personally think that the Mountain West might be a better bet in the long term. So that's something I just once again would like to stress. And basically, like, again, I don't know what the conversations are behind the scenes between admin and our athletic department, but either this is going to work out or we're going to have a new athletic director, if I had to guess. Not saying that, I want that to happen one way or the other. Everything from that I've seen online, at least, how our athletic director portrays himself and, presents himself on social media. I like him. It's just, I don't know. This just feels like we're all in on Sonny Dykes being the savior and like taking us to that next level. And right now it looks like despite Sonny Dykes doing everything he can to take us to the next level, finding these, Rashad Samples, nobody wanted to give him an on-field role. Sonny Dykes was the only one that like wanted to give him that opportunity. Places wanted to hire him as like their director of recruiting. And he's like, I want to be a position coach, an on-field coach. And they're like, yeah, we can't make it happen. And he's like, this guy's bringing 4 stars that are being recruited by Oklahoma, Texas, and TCU into SMU. And they won't let him coach running backs while he's not on the recruiting trail. Like, what is wrong with you guys? And like, eventually I think people are going to wise up. And so I'm worried we're not going to have the money. And I'm worried that Sonny Dykes isn't going to be able to take us to the promised land, because after all of this work that they've done, we've ended up in a worse spot than we were in a decade ago. It's so crazy to think about how that can possibly happen. It's like one of those situations where like, how is it possible that like, that you do everything properly and everything breaks like not your way? That's the unfortunate thing. Us and Memphis both. So that's I think I've said enough for tonight. I don't know. I'm about done. I've given all my thoughts. I'm not a fan of this, but like at the same time, like, what are you gonna do? Like, I feel like I've been pretty neutral, like on social media in terms of like, what are you gonna do? I've been neutrally cynical, I think is a good way to describe it. So I'm excited. I'm excited about the potential of UTSA fans supplanting UCF fans, just not even missing a beat in terms of having like a rabid fan base that like I can be a part of 51 weeks out of the year. I am excited about that. I do really like UCF Twitter. I'm very much so in the minority of the non-UCF people that like UCF Twitter. And based on anything I've gotten from UTSA Twitter, they probably vehemently deny it, which is probably a good indication that they are very similar to UCF Twitter.
I've been saying it for years.
I'm just in it for the jokes. I'm in it for the good vibes. And like, as long as those keep rolling, who cares? What does it all matter? We're not making the playoff anytime soon. They'll expand to 12 and we still won't get in. And they're going to say, you didn't play anybody. And we're going to say, we wanted to. But instead of adding Coastal and App State and Louisiana, we added UNT, Charlotte, and Rice. And, it's going to be what it's going to be. There's nothing I can do about it at this point.
North Texas is going to be a monster by God. But if not, then I'm just, jokes on me. But all right, boys. Well, anything else? Do you feel like we touched on everything that we needed to touch on tonight?
Well, you did say something earlier that you just reminded me of that I wanted to jump back on. You said something about like UNT is going to do their best. Like, yeah, I expect that them to, or they're going to try their best. I was like, yeah, obviously, like Seth Luttrell's been trying his best. Like, everybody's trying their best. If you're not trying your best, you're in the wrong business. So that's one thing I did want to push back on when you're like using that as a defense. Like, obviously you should be trying your best. If you're not, we need to have a different conversation. So anyways, that's all I have to say. I'm done. Follow me on Twitter, please. I promise that my tweets are fire. So just go ahead and check that out. Again, CJ Olson 2000. All the links are in the bio. If you've made it this far, you obviously don't hate me that much. Even though UNT fans don't exactly love my apparently smug look. So, yeah.
He's the guy from Polar Express, Jared. You gotta go check.
Apparently,
that
I look like the nerdy
Okay.
kid that everybody hates from Polar Express.
I'll look it up.
With the monocle. But Jared, what did you have to say? I know you had something to say.
Oh, I was gonna say I could do this all night. So CJ, a lot of things that you're saying are giving me flashbacks to what the legacy Conference USA schools said when the Sun Belt and the FCS call-ups came in. And those programs just stopped investing for the most part. They were like, what's the point? We're in this crappy conference with this crappy TV contract, yada, yada, yada. I mean, like Southern Miss did practically nothing to raise their profile in the past couple of years. Like, they did no stadium renovations that I know of. Like, I don't think their support staff grew much. Their budget didn't grow. Same for Marshall. Same, like Middle Tennessee got in Conference USA and did nothing. Florida International did nothing, right? So they let this stagnation happen in their program, when if they would have invested, they could have dominated Conference USA. They could have been ranked consistently. They could have got the best bowl tie-ins. They could have been on TV somewhat frequently as far as Conference USA goes. And I really think Southern Miss is in a position where if they continue to invest the way that they have and they continue to get Dallas to embrace them, I can definitely see a scenario where they do get those playoff access, if after the expansion happens. And I hope that the rest of the AAC just continues to move forward with their P6 aspirations, even though they're probably upset with some of the schools that are coming in, because ultimately you control the future of your program more than your conference affiliation does. And that's my closing remarks.
Yeah, I mean, just to keep going, because I could do this all night too. I keep saying I'm tired. I absolutely I'm not gonna be able to go to bed for another hour. I feel like I've just taken a double shot of espresso and I don't even drink coffee. But when it comes to the whole conference thing, when we started Power 6, people laughed at us. It was a joke. I was even kind of I would say it kind of tongue in cheek, being really, this is what we're going with.
Yeah.
And now it's finally starting to become true, and it's then the rug gets pulled out from under us. So you do have to kind of manifest that. I will say, don't love the whole idea of there were a lot of people that are saying what you were saying, and then they just gave up. I would really prefer my team to not just give up. I feel like I've invested a lot of time. I mean, SMU is expensive. I've invested a lot of money. I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. The good thing to come out of this is at least now we can have a weekly AAC podcast going. I mean, hell, why not at this point? Get Miles in here, make it, a Mount Rushmore of AAC folks.
Amen. Well, all right, boys. Well, thanks for joining on, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about in the not so distant future, because we're all going to be in the same family soon, like it or not. But, once again, thanks for jumping on. And guys, go give Jared and CJ a follow and tune into both of their podcasts, because it is exceptional AAC content. And all right, guys. Well, thanks again. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.